Eugenics, immoral or just? Let's find out today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Manav Singh, and in this video, we are going to be talking about the genetic topic of eugenics. For those of our viewers who may not know about eugenics, a very basic, almost dictionary definition is that eugenics is the concept of supporting the artificial selection of genetic traits that society deems desirable for the ideal human race. Today, we have our experts who will delve into the concept further. A very warm welcome to you all, and please, would you introduce yourselves to our audience?
I'm Arya Saroff, and I'm arguing against eugenics.
My name's Jude Schmelter, and I'm also arguing against eugenics.
I'm Christopher Truitt, arguing for eugenics.
I'm Justin Nguyen, also arguing for eugenics.
Perfect. Thank you. For today's debate, let me explain the format to the audience. As our guest mentioned, there are two guests who support eugenics' existence, while the other two guests are against eugenics existing at all. All I ask you, as the guests, is that we maintain respectful dialogue and make sure to focus more on evidence and ethics rather than personal opinions, as this is an informational podcast. With that, let's get started. To introduce further, let's talk about the incidents that are the most widely known example of eugenics, that is, with Nazi Germany. We've all learned about the forced sterilizations and discriminatory policies against the Jewish population of Germany. I mean, this is something taught repeatedly in the American education system. In these classes, because of this history, eugenics is portrayed negatively. Now, with modern advances in genetic technology and gene editing, debates have been sort of reopened regarding whether eugenics has a place in modern society. Is it possible for eugenics to be applied ethically? What are you guys' thoughts?
So, with eugenics in modern day, it's very much stigmatized as kind of a taboo word, especially from Hitler and his regime. Their ideal is that, hey, let's use eugenics, let's incorporate that into our philosophy, use it to wipe out people. Now, that's not initially what it was, it never was. Charles Davenport, he's one of the fathers of eugenics, and this topic dates back way before World War II. We've got his book he wrote on heredity and eugenics back in 1912, and he's arguing for points that directly contradict what Hitler's talking about. I mean, he's saying, it doesn't imply the destruction of the unfit either before or after birth. He's saying, let's look at the science, let's use it to sculpt humanity from this point on. He's not saying, hey, let's eliminate people who are bad and let the ones that are good survive. He's saying, hey, let's look at the genetics, let's look at the science of this, and make genetic pairs that are going to make us a happier, healthier society.
Right. And building off of what Christopher just said a little bit, eugenics was a coin term back in 1883 by Darwin's cousin Francis Galton, sorry. And it was originally meant as a term to improve the science of human life, right? And this was a widely accredited scientific term back then by the inventor of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, Presidents Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson. And again, this was widely accepted pre-World War II, before it was radicalized by Nazi Germany.
It was a hot political topic. Everyone was like, hey, this
Right.
is something new. You've got evolution, all these new scientific topics going in. Eugenics was in the blend of it. It was something that was logical and something that could be used.
Something I would also like to point out is that it was used in a lot of different countries. Like, there are a lot of trends in, specifically for the source I collected, it was about, I'll get into more. I'll get into more of it later, actually. But it's found in like Scandinavian countries, and then Darwin was American, right? Like,
yeah.
There are examples. The American presidents endorsed it. So it kind of found its way everywhere. And something I want to point out is that even though, as Justin said, it was like a science to improve the human species, it was still kind of aimed to, like, it's aimed at marginalized groups. From the source I used, it's one of the earlier examples of World War II, like the use of, like, one of the first uses of eugenics was used for involuntary sterilizations, and that's a trend you're going to see in a lot of different countries. I'm sure you guys found like a few sources about that, and I'm sure you have as
Right,
well.
yes. I would like to actually add on to that. So there were several examples of involuntary sterilization through many countries. Obviously, the popular example would be the Nazi Germany, but if I were to talk about a different example like China and India, there have been plenty of examples of involuntary sterilization. And this creates a lot of just ethical issues because who do we choose and who do we get to decide whether we get to sterilize or not?
And yeah, something to add on to that with any Scandinavian countries, and even in America, there were involuntary sterilizations. They were aimed at women who were institutionalized or mentally disabled. So in that way, it becomes much more of a social issue than it is like bettering humanity. Just since there is the involuntary aspect of it, and there's this line you kind of have to draw with like um, what is good and what is bad, essentially, like for society, which is just a very difficult concept.
I would say you're talking about the forced sterilization. With all things, you've got politics, you've got the left, you've got the right, you've got extremes, which don't always make out the core values of what they stand for. Same for eugenics. We have multiple modern bioethics journal peer-reviewed studies talking about, we have one written by Jonathan Anomaly. He's talking about how defending eugenics doesn't commit us to endorsing state-sponsored coercion. Like, it doesn't have to be such an extreme of forcing people. Same thing, eliminating people. Like, it doesn't have to be that extreme of a view. It can be something more tame. We found that one example with farming.
Yeah, so for example, with eugenics kind of being the optimization of traits, whether that's human or non-human. For example, in plants, we use natural selection, we use artificial selection, and there's already ways that we're kind of using eugenics to increase crop yields by selecting certain traits. For example, corn. Corn, we don't really use a wild type of corn. We've kind of did some selective breeding to find the most optimal form of corn that we can use. So I would like to ask you guys, with that in mind, how can we differ eugenics, how it's accepted in plants like corn versus against humans using like the more tame definition and less radicalized one?
I guess you can talk about the social aspect and how this definitely delves into more of a social issue rather than a biological issue. It just seems like human life is a little bit more sensitive to controversy than the life of a plant. Not debating if a plant is less of a human. It's just that is something of controversy right now. And to actually talk about, I like how you talked about optimization. So there is a business, or there could be businesses of optimizing, say, genes that can increase the IQ of individuals, but sometimes those genes could be associated with stress and allergies and lack of empathy. So would you say that you would want to commercialize something like that? Because that could bring a lot of dangers to society.
It could bring, and that's the thing, is even if you're not genetically modifying, people are going to have good traits, they're going to have bad traits, selection or not. There's going to be things that they're going to be proficient at, and there's things that they might be lacking at. As far as the difference between plants and humans, there is practicality in selection to still encourage preferred genes without looking at, hey, this is going to have a specific drawback. You've got pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. So you're pretty much, it's like IVF, you're fertilizing these eggs, you're genetically analyzing them, kind of what Davenport was saying, where it's talking about the genetic foundation. So you're analyzing these embryos, looking at their traits, and you're selecting ones that you want to continue on to the fertilization process. Now this isn't, hey, let's tweak this gene here and make it so it's what we want. We're letting nature do the work.
It's not like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's not like making things like better or worse.
No,
It's
no, and
just-
that's the thing.
exactly.
It's you've got nature taking its course. We're seeing what nature does in each of these embryos. Hey, this one has more immune. This one is not. And you're taking it from there. So you're letting nature do the steps of selecting. You're letting nature do the part of, hey, I'm modifying it this way. It's just chance. And then taking it from there and choosing the ones that are going to have a favorable chance at life, living longer. You have some people born with diseases that they can't help, and it results in a shorter lifespan.
Yeah, so essentially what we're saying is that eugenics is, like you said, you were saying there's like a middle ground of when eugenics is accepted versus when it's not, and we're kind of arguing towards the origin and what made eugenics in the first place, not necessarily what happened with World War II and Nazi Germany and how it got widely out of hand and radicalized with like genocides and murders and
Oh,
killings
yeah.
like that.
It's been greatly distorted. I mean, based on Davenport, like eugenics in its original essence, it was an ideal founded on blatant murder, discrimination. I mean, it was born from a scientific dream.
Yeah.
It was something for making a healthier world and helping us advance in the right direction, not having as much a genetic drift that does occur. Trying to kind of lean that genetic drift into something more artificial, but in an ethical way, not killing, not tweaking in excessive manners.
I just want to add, like, I think like where you guys are coming from is really like it's good. Like, I think that there are a lot of like there could be a lot of benefits. Like if like how you guys are saying, like if somebody has like a chronic disease, like that could really like it's just such a drastic change, and I think that that could be really important. But I think with the origins, like you said, I think it's still regardless of like what it was meant to be, it's still really important to see like what has happened
What it
and
has
why,
done.
yeah, what it has done and like why it happened, and it's just important to note that there are more like elements in something like this with the plant example that you gave, and like how like asking like why is kind of different. Like all plants are like they don't have a social class. Like if they did, they'd all be like the same. Like can you say that like corn is more socially important than a potato? Like
Yeah.
I don't like there's just a lot more variables you gotta say, and like with this um like women specifically, and mentally ill women have been marginalized in that way and really discriminated, and this is kind of why even in like the pre-World War II era with the systematic just horrible murder of just so many people, it's important to like it's important to note that eugenics has that reputation of it's been coined as scientific racism. So
Yeah.
it's just important to note where like even if it excuse me, even if it originated from a good place, it still has a lot of controversy around its origins as well.
Well, applying this topic of eugenics to more modern times, as I mentioned before, we see advances in genetic technology, especially in gene editing like CRISPR-Cas9. I know that Chris, you mentioned that certain technologies could be beneficial, especially in those who have cancers or other disorders in which they may have no other option to survive. Ultimately, should nature be allowed to take its course? Or should these human developed technologies exist that may override the natural process of life? What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, very recently, I mean, that's what we've been talking about. FDA has been approving studies to do human trials to interfere. I mean, you've got the, sickle cell anemia, adjusting that transcription factor to prevent the production of that hemoglobin, which creates the sickle cell. In those situations, I think that stems a little bit from eugenics. That could get a little controversial as far as we don't know what it can do yet.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of again that pre-implantation genetic diagnosis of just analyzing, picking, letting nature do the work, playing it safe, but still guiding natural selection in a way that we want.
Right.
In essence, sorry. In essence, then, is it still natural selection if we're, you know,
Yeah.
being here and modifying these genes?
Yeah, I would essentially say that CRISPR technology is honestly kind of a form of like genetic optimization, like I said earlier. For example, you're removing a certain gene that codes for a faulty trait that we consider like sickle cell anemia or Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and we're replacing it with a wild type gene that we find optimal towards the human race. So I would say, like Chris said, that definitely stems from principles of eugenics of kind of taking away harmful traits like sickle cell and replacing it with the traits that we want specifically.
So, from what it sounds like, at least hearing your side, is that you guys have a very different perspective and almost a somewhat different ideology to what eugenics was applied to in the past. So, I guess we can all agree that the way eugenics have been used in the past for international populations has been widely negative.
Mhm.
and that you are wanting to use or you're advocating for principles of eugenics, but in a different way that could be used to further human
Correct.
life.
That's what the initial dream of it was by Davenport. Again, yeah, it's been widely distorted, and we're arguing for the original essence of it. Of yes, it in the wrong hands, and it has been in the wrong hands. It gains a bad reputation, and that's what it has. But there is the potential with the right scientists, with the right leaders, to do good. That's the essence of it, really.
Well, that was a very insightful discussion. I definitely learned a lot from this conversation, and it seems like you all came to the conclusion that the way eugenics was used in the past was wrong, as it hurt human populations. However, it seems that when it is being used to benefit humans and improving human health, eugenics can serve a place in society. And for our audience out there, it is important to remember that the points made about eugenics in this debate are only a portion of the arguments for or against the topic, and that ultimately our end conclusions were made primarily from an American viewpoint, and that these are just few of the discussions surrounding the topic. Once again, I'm your host, Manav Singh. Thank you for watching.